December 2nd, 1776. A rapid retreat across New Jersey had just been executed by the fatigued American army, ill-clad and malnourished. Having won almost no major battles in the War for Independence, the Patriot cause began to rapidly lose support throughout the 13 colonies. Rising to action in the darkest of circumstances, General George Washington valiantly led a 10-day campaign at Trenton and Princeton in the midst of defeat and dejection, revitalizing the waning Patriot cause with hope and saving the Revolution from a tragic demise. While implementing unconventional battle tactics during the 10-day campaign, Washington simultaneously took a noble stand for the human rights prevalent in our society today, keeping his actions and practices consistent with the fundamental American values he stood for: humanity, democracy, and liberty. From 1764 to 1774, British Parliament imposed a myriad of oppressive acts upon the American colonies. Conflict and tension began to rise until the battles of Lexington and Concord on April 19, 1775, marked the beginning of the Revolutionary War. The American Army, also known as the Continental Army, was led by General George Washington, and it was at a major disadvantage. Each American soldier had only half a year of training, whereas each British soldier had a full 7 years of training. During the summer of 1776, the British Army invaded and took control of New York, forcing the Americans out of the valuable colony. From the start of November to early December, they retreated through New Jersey, across the Delaware River, and ultimately into Pennsylvania. The enemy in the heart of our country, enlistments expiring, the disaffected daily increasing, and public sentiment at a stand. 9 out of every 10 American troops had been captured or killed since the fall of New York, and with many troops deserting the Continental Army altogether, the Americans were in dire need of a victory. As 1776 came to a close, the British settled into winter quarters throughout New Jersey. While they halted their offensive assault, Washington noticed the opportunity for a unique offensive attack on the enemy forces at Trenton. Stationed there were 1,500 highly disciplined German mercenaries, or Hessians, working for the British. Knowing of their strength and precision, General Washington organized a surprise attack on Trenton that was to take place during the early morning of December 26th. On Christmas night, during a raging nor'easter, 2,400 American troops crossed the icy Delaware River into New Jersey. Equipped with muskets and artillery, Washington's forces began their 9-mile march towards Trenton. At about 8 a.m. on December 26th, the Americans advanced into Trenton, implementing Washington's first innovative battle tactic, attacking from 2 different sides. The inclemency of the weather had thrown the enemy entirely off their guard. They made but feeble resistance. Within an hour, the Hessians had surrendered. 918 had been either captured, wounded, or killed. As opposed to the abusive methods of the British, General Washington allowed the Hessian prisoners to retain their baggage, ordering that they be treated with favor and humanity. They styled him a very good rebel.
When they captured hundreds of Hessians at Trenton, he ordered that they would be protected and that they would be treated with humanity. And what Washington was doing was linking the conduct of the American War of Independence to the values of the American Revolution.
British diarist Nicholas Creswell wrote, "This has given them new spirits and will prolong the war. They have recovered from their panic." However, Washington's general orders stated he hopes they will not now turn their backs upon this important crisis, which may, more than probably, determine the fate of America. On December 27th, Washington crossed the Delaware River back into Pennsylvania due to his lack of troops and the vicinity of oncoming British forces. On December 29th, the Continental Army ventured back across the frozen Delaware River and into Trenton once again. To convince troops to stay despite their expiring enlistments, Washington orated a successful speech. "If you will consent to stay only 1 month longer, you will render that service to the cause of liberty and to your country." On January 2nd, British General Charles Cornwallis and his 8,000 soldiers marched south to Trenton, where they clashed with the Americans in the Battle of Assunpink Creek, or the Second Battle of Trenton. Although the Americans retreated out of Trenton and across the nearby Assunpink Creek Bridge, they suffered far less casualties than the enemy. That night, both Washington and Cornwallis brought together their councils of war, though they had contrasting counseling methods. Cornwallis harshly disregarded the viewpoints of others, while Washington was open to discussion. He allowed locals to join his military consultations, which led to the proposal of marching overnight to Princeton to attack British troops. Mere hours later, Washington's second strategic tactic was carried out. A small American force created the facade of the entire Continental Army's presence by making loud noises with shovels and raising large bonfires. In reality, Washington had already begun his deceptive march to Princeton. As the Continental Army neared Princeton on the morning of January 3rd, they divided into 2 separate columns, executing Washington's third exceptional battle tactic. The first column was ordered to intercept British reserves, while the second was ordered to directly attack British regiments. The Battle of Princeton commenced, and though the British initially had the upper hand, Washington's unique method of hindering British reinforcements allowed the Americans to prevail. With a series of victories garnered in the hearts of his troops, Washington settled his army into winter quarters at Morristown. His 10-day stand had saved the Revolutionary War from a disastrous end. Hessian Johann von Ewald stated, "Thus the times had changed. 4 weeks ago, we expected to end the war. We had thus far underestimated our enemy." There were 3 distinct ways in which Washington's method of implementing the war differed from the generals of his time. First, he brought about the humane treatment of his prisoners, astonishing the opposition with this unique and stunning conduct. Second, Washington respected the popular opinion of the American people. His distinct method of war counseling took the viewpoint of local citizens into account, setting the standard for today's prosperous democratic society. Lastly, he was ideologically motivated, and even though he did not have the same level of military experience as other generals, Washington understood that the Revolutionary War was driven by the virtues of humanity, democracy, and liberty.
There were some other generals who knew more about military science, as it was beginning to be called, than he did. But they didn't have Washington's way of working with other people. They didn't have the image that Washington presented of the cause itself. They didn't have that quality of strength and courage that we remember in this extraordinary man.
After a series of defeats grim enough to demoralize an entire army, General Washington took a courageous stand for the liberty and freedom he knew the colonists were entitled to as citizens of a united nation. Without his ambitious endeavor to reverse the momentum of the war, the American Revolution would have ended during the unforgiving winter of 1776. However, Washington seized a rare opportunity and tactically acquired an impressive series of victories in a span of just 10 days, all the while showing the world that the American cause was morally just. He took a stand for humanity, and his morals influenced the American army today, with prisoners of war prohibited from being subject to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. Washington's 10-day stand defined fundamental American values, and his daring efforts led to the creation of a free United States of America, in which patriotic ideals and beliefs that are revered by people around the world are not only practiced, but continue to be protected.